Hello everyone. This is Secret Life of what? What is this? Okay. Take two. Hello everyone, I'm Denes Boros. This is the first class of Secret Life of Pawns, the soul of the game. Today I'm going to talk about passed pawns, or passers that we like to say. And the first example will be a classic example. Later examples will kind of be a detour from that. So the first example is between Levon Aronian and Viswanathan Anand. Anand, who just again recently won the Rapid World Championship, which we give hearty congratulations because that's a huge result, as he was the world champion in previous years, but this is a huge comeback. Anyways, this game between Aronian and Anand will show how to create passed pawns in the classical way. So d4, d5, c4, c6. Can anybody tell me what opening is this? Yes? It's the Queen's Gambit, yeah. And there's more specific, right? The Slav, yes. Knight f3, knight f6. And in general, white has a troubled history here. It's difficult to get an advantage here. They tried e3. They tried knight c3, which is the main line. But Aronian tried to deviate from old theory and played queen c2. D takes c4, queen takes c4. In fact, this is still a variation, but a much more rare one. Bishop f5, g3, knight d7. Everyone's just developing their pieces. Castle, rook e1. Now, just for educational reasons, I want to point out that rook d1 would be a huge blunder here. How could black possibly punish this over-eager move rook d1? Hint, it has to do with the strange but quite awkward nature of the queen c4, queen on c4. There is no such a thing as a bad idea. Yeah?
Bishop c2?
Yeah, bishop c2, indeed. So now white is forced to move the rook. Let's say rook d2, that makes the most sense.
Bishop,
And even though your bishop is attacked, let's see if the queen can actually move right now. Not really. So the move,
knight b6?
knight b6, indeed. And now this hits the queen, and it wins it too, because all these important squares on d3 and b3 are covered, especially because of this healthy bishop on c2. So that's something we don't want to fall for. And Levon didn't fall for that one and played rook e1, knight e4, queen b3, queen b6, and knight h4. Now this was a huge novelty at the time in 2007, and they played it for years, but I guess around 2010 they stopped playing it. Bishop h4, g takes h4. Now black has a better structure because this is very ugly, but as our main subject, Aronian is aiming to get the bishop pair for it, and also a hope to get a passed pawn. Knight f6, e4, bishop g6. And in general, when you're trying to get a passed pawn, they usually work when it's an endgame. So obviously, Aronian took on b6, a takes b6, bishop f4. Which pawn break is white aiming for in this position? There are not many available in this position, but there's still one. Yeah?
The e5?
Well, we have kind of a dampened bishop on g2, so we want to activate it somehow.
e5?
d5, yeah. The idea is to go and try to break through with d5, yes. So rook e8, rook d1, b5, bishop d6. Aronian is preparing this idea of d5 while stopping any kind of b4 ideas for black. So what Aronian is playing for is restriction, which is kind of annoying for Anand, as his pieces hardly have any squares to move to. e5, d5, and now comes the d5 move we've been waiting for. Knight h5, bishop f1. Now the sad part for black is that these pawns are too rigid on the queen side. The c6 pawn cannot really take here, which it would like to do, because then we could take the b5 pawn. So f6, Anand is forced to be passive in this position, b3. Now b3 is a very nice move, and is also indicating another break, another way of pawn breaking. And that is the move a4. Knight f4, a4, and it comes. B takes a4, b takes a4. Why did white take with the b pawn instead of the knight? Strategically, what's the idea of b takes a4? Can you, yeah? Yeah, to have a passer maybe, potentially, yeah. And you had an idea.
Well, I would think that, I don't know, just the
Yeah.
knight is protecting all three pawns
Mhm.
in the center, well, and one on the edge,
Mhm.
obviously, so it's protecting,
Mhm.
so you don't really want to move it to the edge
Yeah.
of the board. I would.
Yeah, indeed, the knight on c3 is very useful as it does protect all three pawns. And the third reason is white desperately would like to put the rook on b1 and just hit on the b7 pawn. So Aronian is trying to conjure up more and more advantage in this position, which is difficult if the position stays closed. So he opens it up. B takes a4, b takes a4, bishop f7, rook b1. And also when you attack your opponent's pawn structure, you force their hands. They have to decide either they're going to have to defend them passively or have to make a resolution. Rook a7. Anand decides to wait passively. Rook d1. But Aronian is also patient. He just bolsters this d5 pawn, which is about to become a passed pawn. Rook c8, knight e2, knight takes e2, bishop takes e2, c takes e takes d5. So we can point out the passed pawn in this position, which is, which one? Which pawn? Yep, the d5 pawn. And with two great bishops on d6 and e2, white should have a huge advantage. But still there needs to be some precision to convert it. Knight f8. Now rook takes a4, rook takes b7, and also sometimes ideas with bishop b5 might happen, even though there's now rook g4 check. So knight f8, bishop b5, defending everything. And now white has a very good position, but you still have to come up with a constructive plan to actually win the game. What should white be aiming for? How could white nurse this pawn into a queen? What should be our long-term plan? Using the bishops. Where should we put this bishop on d6? Yeah, e7. So bishop e7 is a very, very good idea, and that's actually well known from Grunfeld structures. When the bishop goes to e7 and the pawn push d6 comes as well, white has a huge initiative then. Rook a8, bishop e7 comes, knight g6, d6, knight takes e7, and now Aronian comes up with a brilliant idea. It's white to move and come up with a fairly unusual tactical solution. Bishop d7, yeah. And now the main idea is that if we take, black has an extra defender here on c8 and a8. But Aronian wants to have just one defender there. So if the rook would move somewhere, let's say c4, then d takes e7, and there's only one defender here. And after, let's say, bishop e8, oh, then it's bishop e6 check immediately winning. So it's already very uncomfortable for black. Therefore, Anand had no choice but to accept the sacrifice and played knight d5, knight c6, that is. Takes on b7, as there's no way of running away. Because if the rook moves to d8, bishop takes c6. The same thing happens if rook b8. Then we just take and we're up a healthy pawn. So knight d4, bishop takes c8, rook takes c8. And in general, the bishop and knight is stronger than the rook. But for a good reason, white is better. What is that reason that white is better here? The passed pawns, exactly. Our topic, the passed pawns. That's why white is much better here. And when I was young, people told me to exchange of something that your opponent has and you don't have. So Aronian decides to go rook b1, threatening the rook b8, which is unfortunately for Anand, since it's not possible to stop. And after that, there won't be a rook to stop these pawns from marching. So rook f8, rook b8, bishop e8, a5, knight f3 check, king f1, knight d2, king e1. Notice that Aronian consciously moves his king to e1 and not e2 because his sacrifice wouldn't work as well as knight takes b1. And if you don't take the knight could jump with a c3 check. So king e1 is very important. Knight b1, a6. And now these two passes are just too strong. So bishop c6, a7, king f7. And here, Aronian comes up with the deadly move and wins the game. Yeah? d7. As the bishop on c6 is overloaded, it was already just protecting this a8 square, so you cannot just take now, because we would take, and queen. So king e7, rook takes f8, and king d7, queens. And sooner or later, this game was won by white as h5, rook a7 check, and Aronian picked up another pawn, and in 3 more moves, Anand resigned. So this is the classical way of creating passed pawns. I'm going to show some of my games and a very classical one by world champions where you actually use a passed pawn in the middle game. So this is my first game played in the Elakesh Memorial, and I like this game because it specifically shows how important it is to create a passed pawn. Knight f6, e5. This is called the Sveshnikov variation, even though later Sveshnikov likes to claim this line to be his, which is called Kalashnikov. Knight f6, knight c3, e5, knight db5, d6, bishop g5, a6, knight d5. There's also a move with bishop takes f6, g takes, knight d5, bishop g7, c3, with long variations. But I went knight d5, bishop e7, takes, c3, rook b8, bolstering this b5 pawn. Knight c2, bishop g5, bishop e2, just developing. Knight e7, knight b4. Well, in these type of positions, the fight is revolving around this d5 square. Whoever has control over that has the better position. At this moment, me. Bishop b7. And what is kind of natural in these Sveshnikov positions, that white needs to play energetically to actually claim an advantage. So I'd ask you to find a move for white which keeps the initiative and gives some hope for white for an advantage. It's white to move here. Well, it's easy to notice that most of the weaknesses for black is on white squares. So the d5 square is extremely weak from black's perspective. these squares are kind of loosey-goosey. So how could we use the fact that these squares are extremely weak? Yeah? C6 what?
C4.
C4?
Yeah.
C4, the idea is good, but the problem that you would weaken this diagonal. Also, black could play A5. But the basic idea is good. You want to undermine the queen side, right? Yeah.
So A4.
A4, exactly. The idea is, if A5 now, then I could take on B5 with check. With C4, I couldn't do that because I blocked the view of this bishop. I would just hit the pawn, so I can't do that. Therefore, I played A4. Bishop takes D5. And here again comes the question, in which piece should I take it? I consider taking with the knight, but if I take it with the knight, that will be just the standard Sveshnikov positions where I might have a slight advantage, but not too much. Let's say knight d5, castles, takes, and I'm not sure that white is so much better. So I took a slightly riskier approach with e takes d5, but I realized something in this position. He has no other move than queen b6. If he plays a5, I wouldn't take on b5 because that would run into rook b5, a takes, and a takes b4. And my structure would look very bad with this Irish pawn structure. But I have knight a6, attacking the knight and the pawn simultaneously, and I would win an exchange. So queen b6 is the only move, and here I found a good solution, which gave me the advantage. It's white to move and get a big advantage.
Knight takes a6.
And if queen takes a6?
Bishop takes b5.
Bishop takes b5, rook takes,
And
a
then
takes.
pawn takes, queen takes, and then rook down to a8.
Yes, exactly. So I realized that I have this wonderful sacrifice, and I get 2 pawns for the 2 pieces and a rook for me. So queen takes b5 doesn't work, as you mentioned, because of rook a8, and I will have this awesome takes on h8. There's no one who could defend against that, and I have a great position. So queen b7, c4. Now, the reason I'm better here is that I have a bunch of pawns here, and also the b5 is a protected passed pawn. And that will be the decisive one in this game. Castles, rook a6. Now I really like this rook a6 move. In general, when you have a useful move before castling, in professional and high-level chess, you try to get as much you can get before castling. So you try to activate this rook first, hitting on d6, and just then castle. Because I might not have this extra tempo later. Rook c8, b3. Now I have all my pawns defended. And actually I calculated this, that rook takes d5 doesn't really work for him. Because obviously c takes, he would have rook c1, and this would be annoying. This would be pretty annoying. But I can take with my queen, takes, rook c1. And when he tried to do the same thing, I checkmate him with the same pattern. So there's no tricks for him. Queen c7, castle, g6. And all of my pieces are pretty well placed. So this b5, d5, my pawns I'm happy with. But there are other pieces I need to activate. how can I or how should I activate my pieces in this position? Yeah?
Queen to d4.
Queen to where?
G4.
Queen g4. Well, if you go to g4, you're moving on the side where black is playing. Black wants to play on the king side.
Or queen d2 like queen d2 and then you have a...
If you go queen d2, I take you
Oh,
on
no,
the bishop.
Queen A1.
Queen a1, yes. What's the idea behind king in a1?
But obviously you have the A file.
Yeah. I have a firm grip on the a file now. And also I want to exchange off this only good defensive piece on c8. Bishop d2, queen a3. Well, I'm not happy with the idea of bishop b4, so I'm going to stop that first. Knight f5, rook c6, takes, b6. And now there's not enough defenders for black to stop me from promoting this pawn. As the only defender here is the bishop, which is still kind of far away. It should be on c5 by now. e4, rook a1, just bringing some more fuel. Queen a8, takes. It's a check that's important, otherwise e2 might be a threat. King g7. Now I calmly stop this idea with king f1. E takes f2. And how can I wrap this game up? Yeah? b7, and if bishop e1? Yeah.
G2. Oh, no.
If king e2, I have knight e3. And I promote my queen. So even in winning positions, you have to be careful. What? Yes? Rook e8, yes. And after rook e8, my opponent resigned, as I'm just defending against his only threat of knight e3 jump. If knight e3, I just take it, and I just queen. So in these middle game positions, it's still possible to create passed pawns. And in fact, you should aim to create passed pawns, as it will be useful in the endgame, just like in the game I played against Nemeth. So my second game was played against Danya Naroditsky. It was played in DC, Washington. It wasn't played in Hugoven. That's a glitch. e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, bishop b4, e5. This is a classical French Winawer line that we played. Actually, Naroditsky played this against Caruana in the US Championship, I think, months before. Takes, queen a5, bishop d2, queen a4. In fact, this queen a4 idea, which is trying to kind of stop this d2 bishop from activating, was popularized by the famous Hungarian Grandmaster Portish. So I played queen b1. Now Caruana played queen g4, which could be better, but both is playable. The old main line is actually queen b1 that I played, c4. And now a strategic battle will ensue. h4, I'm trying to ramp up my pawn with h4, h5, h6, knight c6, h5, bishop d7, but he doesn't seem to be too bothered about that. Queen b2, h6, g3, castles, rook b1. Now, this queen b2, rook b1 plan might seem a bit weird, but my point is, in some variations, black is aiming to bring the rook up on the queen side. So I'm stopping that for good. Rook b1, b6, knight f3, knight e7, bishop g2, rook f8. He's clearly preparing the idea of f6. bishop f4. I'm getting ready for that to happen. King b7, but he has time, and it's a slow strategic position. Queen c1. We're kind of playing against or for the idea of f6. I'm trying to stop it with my queen and bishop, and he's trying to get ready to play it anyways. Bishop e8, a very good move, getting ready to hit on h5 whenever the position opens up. g4, I defend against that. f6, e takes f6, g takes f6, bishop d6, rook g8, bishop h3, f5. I have a feeling that even though black is fine, f5 seems to be a bit too aggressive. But that's my opinion of this position. Bishop e7, f takes g4, bishop f6. So that's an intermediate move, as I will unfortunately lose one of these pieces, but I want to create the situation that's most favorable for me. Rook h7, and now I use this tactical moment to create a passed pawn for myself, which will be actually pivotal in the later part of the game. So it's white to move and create a passed pawn. And it's white to move to create a passed pawn in this position. Yep. Knight g5. So the idea is that I'm going to lose the piece back. I'm just up a piece temporarily. So I want to create something for it. So knight g5, h takes g5, bishop takes g4. And now I at least have a healthy h5 pawn. Rook f8, bishop takes g5, e5. Bishop e3 takes. And now Naroditsky plays a move that looks very tempting, but I think it's a bit too early. It's black to move, and if he had played this move, he would have good play here. What should black play in this position? Obviously, my main weaknesses are my pawns. The pawn on d4, c2, and a little bit on h5 as well, even though I'm protecting it for the moment. Yeah? c3, that's what he played. The move is actually bishop g6, what he should have played. I can't take because of the back rank check, and I lose everything. And otherwise, I'll have to make some awkward moves, even though I'm a pawn up, as this threat of bishop takes c2 is quite strong. So he played c3, and here I played a strong move, queen d1. I'm not really concerned with the a3 pawn. I really want to defend these pawns on d4 and h5 mostly. So he did play bishop g6, but now I have a very comfortable defensive move, which is very natural in these Winawer structures. Yes, rook b3 indeed. And now the black queen is cut off, and I'm left with this very strong passer on h5. Bishop e4, f3, rook e7. And now he thought that he has very good pressure if I take on e4, rook takes e4, and that would indeed be pretty dangerous. But I played something that you don't usually play on move 32. Yeah? h6? Well, no, I didn't play that one. In fact, I castled, which is quite rare on move 32. And he missed this idea. The problem here for black now that he's running out of counterplay, and I'm still left with this extra h5 pawn. Bishop f5, rook takes c3, knight a5, bishop g5, rook f7. But he didn't give up and came up with this pretty good plan of coming with the knight to c4, trying to have some ghost threats on d2 or e3. Bishop f5, rook f5, f4. So whenever you're up a pawn and you feel that you have the advantage and have a better passed pawn, try to exchange some pieces. Queen d7, h6. Now I defend both of these pawns, and I should be comfortably better here. Knight c4, queen h5, knight d2, rook e1, knight e4, rook e3, queen c7. Now, Naroditsky managed to conjure up some play here. So now I'm at a crossroad. This knight is extremely strong on e4, threatening ideas of knight takes g5, and even sometimes rook takes g5 and queen g3 ideas might work. So I have to come up with a good move here. It's white to move and take the initiative. You raise your hand? Yeah?
Rook takes knight.
Yeah, rook takes e4, of course. So the idea is I'm trying to remove your only very aggressive piece left and hoping to use my pawns on h6, which are pretty menacing, and f4 to full effect. D takes e4, rook takes e4, queen takes c2. Now I didn't see mate in this position, and I don't think that I can mate yet because this queen is just too far away. So I played queen e2, as the endgame should be favorable to me. And Naroditsky seemed to agree with that and played queen c6. But he still should have taken, and it's not necessarily that easy to win this position, although white's plan is quite easy to go up king g2, king g4, and try to nurse that pawn into queening. So queen c6, rook a7 check, king b8, h7. If you have a passed pawn, push that passed pawn. Rook b5, and now black is threatening with this rook b1 ideas. So I need to come up with a good plan to parry that. How can I parry that idea of rook b1 and rook h1 check? Yeah? Queen e1, then you invite my opponent to go to rook b2, and then we get too passive. We don't want to get too passive because my king is a bit airy at the moment.
Queen e6.
Queen e6, he could still go rook b1 check. So I decided to go with a prophylactic move of moving away immediately. Because if he goes rook b1, then I can give a check and play queen e4, and I don't have to bother with these rook b1 ideas anymore. At the moment, I don't really have this idea of queen e5 check because the rook takes away that square. So rook c8 was played, rook g7. Now my simple plan is to play rook g8, rook b3, rook g8, rook b1, and after queen g2, I'm stopping all of his ideas. And after queen e6, rook takes c8, queen takes c8, as otherwise I just queen. And I play bishop f6, and he resigned, as there's no way to stop this h-pawn from promoting. So in general, I was majorly helped with the idea of creating a passed pawn in the middle game, and that helped me to win this complicated game against Naroditsky. My third game that I want to show is played against Daggupati, and the middle part is not as important. I'm just skipping through that one. This is the critical position. Now this position is fairly equal, and there's not much going on, but it's kind of a dull kind of equal. White can push, and I will eventually play knight e5 to put some slight pressure on this solid but passive pawn structure. bishop b4, knight e5, takes, takes, knight d7, bishop g3, d takes, b takes, e5. Now e5 is a very creative idea here that was played by my opponent. But I had no choice. I have to accept that pawn sacrifice. Takes, takes, rook e8. Now, if you want to prove that your position is sound, you have to take sacrifices time after time. So in this position, how can I be stingy and keep to my pawn and keep my pawn advantage? Yeah, f4. This does look ugly, but there's no other way I could keep my pawn. Queen b6, queen e2, just sticking to my pawn, f6. And now I come up with a very nice positional idea. And in some ways, it's a sacrifice too. Yeah? Knight e4. So the idea is that I'm willing to part with my pawn advantage, but for that I'll get an eternal knight on e4. So I played c5, queen c7, and now I had a dilemma. There's two moves here. What would be the first move that pops into our brain, pops into mind? Yeah? Knight d6. Now that was obviously my first thought. Knight d6 was my first thought, but then I realized that takes, takes, that indeed I win an exchange. But this bishop is just crippling my rooks, and it constantly threatens bishop takes c5. Meanwhile, my rooks are kind of passive. So I decided that this is not sure if I'm much better here. So instead, I played f5. And I'm kind of proud of this move, because this move creates a pseudo-passed pawn, which will eventually lead to the downfall of my opponent. And instead of being up in a complicated position and having an exchange advantage, I chose to have a majority on the king side. Rook f8, rook f1. I'm kind of planning and preparing this idea of f6. Rook d8, queen g4, bishop d2. A very nice little trick by my opponent, trying to just create some like a little bit of disorganization in my position. So I decided that I'll go back and I'll stop this idea of bishop d2 for good. Now, my opponent didn't feel it in this position yet, but this f-pawn, as Invader Zim would say, will cause him to have a doomed position. So f6, indeed I played that, queen d7, and rook f1. I felt that I need an extra piece to help me in the attack. He didn't take on c5 because of this simple takes, and I have these knight f6 ideas, which are pretty hard to parry. He played g6, and now I need to come up with an idea how to continue. It's white to move and get an advantage with that very strong f6 pawn. Yeah? If you play knight d6, I take on c5. In general, your pass pawn is the strongest if you push it. Yeah? f7, king g7, and how should I continue here? Knight f6, yes, queen e6. And again, I was faced with the choice of taking on d5 or doing something else, but I just spotted something unusual. Knight e8 check, that's what I played. If he goes king h7, I can go rook f6, and an eventual queen g4 or queen c2 would win the game because there's no one who could stop me from taking on g6. So he decided to take on e8. And here I came up with a pretty nice idea. It's white to move and win. It's a rare tactical idea that I found in this position. Yeah? F takes c8, I would just take back, and there I'm not sure if I'm winning. So it's not f takes c8. Yes? Queen f3, then I move my rook. Yeah? Rook f6. That's the other solution. I played queen g4. Because if queen takes g4, I have a very nice solution here. It's white to move and win. Yeah? You have to put a piece there. F takes e8, what? Knight, yes. F takes c8, knight. And surprisingly, I checkmate. Very nice checkmate there. Now, he played queen e7. If he goes rook d8, I have a very simple solution here. Yeah? Yeah?
Rook f6.
Rook f6, I take your queen. Be careful. Yeah? Come again?
Take the queen.
If you take the queen, I take. And you just only win an exchange. You can win bigger here. Go bigger if you can. Yeah, just promote queen and takes, and then I win the queen. And obviously, it's never too late to lose. So here is still, you should take, and then you're just a queen up. So he played queen e7, and I played rook f6 now. Now again, there's no queen f6 because f takes c8, knight. And then it's a double attack. So he played g5. And I was heavily relying again on the f7 pawn and played queen h5 again. And in this position, rook h8, I have a very, very pretty mate that I can give. Yeah? Queen g6, I play king f8. Rook g6 check. So king can't go to h7, can go here because I mate. So black is forced to go to f8. Yeah?
Oh, no.
Yeah, queen takes h6, rook takes, and rook g8 mate. So this shows how powerful it can become. A pass pawn can become very powerful if you promote it and push it as far as the 7th rank. So it's very important to support it with rooks, like I did in this game. This heavy artillery was a good support for my pawn, and that way I could come up with this very nice queen sacrifice with queen g4. And last but not least, I want to show this game, which actually was a debut for Botvinnik against Capablanca. And with this win, he became a real contender for the World Championship title. So here, how should we continue with white? Obviously, we're a pawn down, so we have to rush with an attack. Yeah? f4, of course. f4. Now f5 is a huge threat So Capablanca, as a natural genius he was, knew that he has to stop that forever. But obviously Botvinnik took en passant, correct? Knight takes f6, f5. And if you're under attack, there's a rule you could follow and you should follow. What you should do when your opponent is attacking. Counterattack or exchange some pieces. And that's what Capablanca does. Takes on e1, rook takes e1, rook e8. But now Botvinnik comes up with a very powerful move. And actually this move is the clincher. If it weren't for this move, Botvinnik would have had a tough time. Yeah? Rook e6. Rook e6. And now rook takes f6 is threatened. And Capablanca is basically forced to take. F takes e6. And voila. Oh, no. Voila. There's our passed pawn we've been dreaming of in the middle game. So queen e, king g7, queen f4, just coming closer and also trying to pin the king. Queen e8, queen e5, queen e7, and Botvinnik finds a very spectacular move. It's white to move and get the initiative. Did you raise your hand?
No.
No? Did you stretch?
Yeah.
That's good. Stretching is helping. Hint, Botvinnik's idea would be labeled as removing an important defender. Yeah?
Bishop A3.
Bishop a3, yes. Exclams everywhere. So if the queen moves, we'll just start pushing the pawn and that will be the end of it. So Capablanca took. Or should we continue? Yes? If e7, the king moves to f7 and it's not over yet.
Oh. Knight H.
Yeah?
For me?
Yeah.
Me?
Yes.
Okay, knight H8. Oh, no, yeah, knight H8.
Knight h5.
I'm 5.
Yeah. Check. Takes.
And then you move it on. Oh, yeah, like
Queen
queen G5.
g5.
And then you move that knight.
Yeah. So the king has very few places to go. King f8. Queen takes f6. The king goes to g8 as e8 runs into the idea of queen f7, queen d7 checkmate. So king g8. If queen f7, I go to h8. E7. That's it. E7. And now Capablanca is in huge trouble, as not only this pawn is threatening to promote, but queen f8 is also a mate. So e7, queen c1 check, here, queen c2, king g3. And Botvinnik is just running away with the king. King takes h5. And sadly for Capablanca, queen g6 doesn't even work, because I take, king takes g6, and the lone king stops you from ever entering this f7 square. And the pawn just promotes. So, so after a few checks, queen e2 check, new mainline, yeah, queen e2 check, king h2, king e4, g4, queen e1 check, king h5, and Capablanca resigned. There's no more checks, and there's no way black can stop the queen f8 and this pawn from promoting. So that's the way to use your pass pawns in the middle games. And I hope that you learned a valuable lesson from these examples. Thank you.